Welcome to the Business for Good podcast, a show where we spotlight companies making money by making the world a better place. I'm your host, Paul Shapiro, and if you share a passion for using commerce to solve many of the world's most pressing problems, then this is the show for you. Happy New Year, friend, and welcome to the 104th episode of the Business for Good podcast. While the show comes out twice each month, year-round, we count each year as a new season. So you are now officially listening to the 5th season of this podcast. If you're just joining us for the first time, there are 4 great seasons of evergreen episodes just waiting for your download. But if you want a cheat sheet to the most downloaded episodes ever in the show's history, we have now added a new section on the homepage at businessforgoodpodcast.com so you can go see what listeners have been most interested in. All right, now on to this episode. I recently gave a speech at the TEDx Boston conference, and while there, I saw Shelly Zhang give a speech also about her company, Molten Materials, and I was highly impressed by what she's doing. I knew I had to get her onto this show, and so I tried to talk with her after her talk, but she was swamped with admirers, so I couldn't even get close to her. Thankfully, she replied to my email a couple days after the conference, and we recorded this episode together. What is Shelly doing that is impressing so many people? Nearly none of the plastic that we use gets recycled. As we've discussed before on previous episodes of this show, the plastic that we throw into the recycling bin often ends up in landfills, since it's just not economical to recycle the plastic, especially now that China has banned imports of American plastic waste. So, what are we going to do with all these vast oceans of plastic that we seem to love to use? Shelly has an idea. As you'll hear in this episode, the death of Shelly's father led to the birth of her company, Molten Materials. Armed with her PhD in engineering, Shelly has pioneered a method of taking plastic waste and upcycling it into pavement sealers, asphalt rejuvenators, and more. In other words, she's betting that she can take our trash and turn it into her treasure, all while solving the pressing problem of what to do with all of our plastic waste. Already, Shelly has earned seed investment, hired a dozen team members, filed for various patents, and is now readying her first ever product, an upcycled plastic DIY pavement sealer that you can use on your own driveway or other cracked surfaces. Her story is an inspirational one, moving to the US from China, earning her PhD, and now founding her own company. I think you'll be impressed too, so let me allow Shelly to tell you her story herself. Hello, Shelly, and welcome to the Business for Good podcast.
Hi, Paul. Good to be here.
It's awesome to be talking with you. You gave a really stellar talk at the TEDx Boston event. So you and I were both speakers there, and I was also in your audience, and I got to listen to you, and I was so wowed. I thought, geez, I need to talk to this person on the podcast because I was so interested in what you're doing. But before we get, Shelly, to what you are doing now, what led you to this? Like, I see you have a PhD in engineering. What was it that led you to think, oh, I want to go get a PhD in engineering?
Oh, it's that's a good question. I think growing up, you could call me a daddy's girl. I was just really close to my dad, and he was a self-taught, this inventor / engineer, and we would always be building things together, making things, and sometimes this little, I started learning electrical circuits from him and learning how to weld very early on. And now one of my meditation, self-soothing habits is welding. Sorry,
Wow.
soldering. That's what I meant. Right.
Soldering. Okay, cool.
When I get stressed, I would just sit down and solder some circuits that I needed to do. So yeah, that winds back to high school. I guess we first started learning circuits. I just somehow was really good at it, and I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. I can be an electrical engineer myself. I like daddy. Somehow it just, and then the more I got into it, and the more I feel, wow, this is a fascinating field, not just electrical engineering, just engineering and science in general. So that's how I got into engineering.
It's one thing to be interested in engineering, and it's hard. It's funny because I've never soldered anything in my life, to be honest with you. And so for me, it's foreign to think, oh, that would be soothing and meditative to start soldering circuit boards. But I'm glad it was for I'm glad that it was for you. But it's a far jump to go from being interested in soldering to thinking this is going to be my PhD. So what happened? You were going to Caltech, and then you thought, I really should be an electrical engineer by profession.
It's the moment more came from I was doing an internship, and then I was internship, I think, with Fairchild in Maine, not to say anything bad about the company, just like a corporate company. And then I was thinking, when I graduate the next year from college, should I stay here or should I get another job or go to grad school? So I was undecided at that point. And then just the 9-5 every day. And I was in an engineering role, and I thought, oh, if this is what like a beginning engineer would be doing and then just going into industry, then I didn't like that. It's mostly the 9-5, everything's defined. You have a certain role. And then that's what pushed me over the boundary to pursue a graduate school, either a master or PhD degree. And I just somehow, I think I was really lucky, and I got into Caltech, and that kind of opened up just a whole bunch of doors, just brought to this, my mindset to a different level. I'm really grateful for that.
Before you were there, were you thinking, I may want to start my own company, or was that an idea that you had once you were in school and you're thinking, hey, I might actually be interested in being an entrepreneur here?
Oh, yes. I think that I thought I would be. And actually, before I was graduating from college the last year, I was helping my dad with his business. Just growing up, I witnessed my dad as a failed entrepreneur, he practically tried hard and died trying. And he's my hero. How my family put me through college was when I was really young, and then everything was tough. I grew up in China, by the way. And so my dad quit his job and started this business to fix televisions for people. So I think he would charge $10 and he would work 3 days and to fix one television. And then somehow, because the whole economic situation in China, there was a lot of opportunities. So he, at one point, made some decent money with his business doing like highway, I think, for actually making control panels, like machines that controls the ventilation and AC for the buildings. Anyway, and towards the end of my first year of college, that business just really was having a hard time. And then he was pivoting. So he started like making this little asphalt repair crack filler machine for this, just by sheer chance, for some importer in the US. And then that wasn't making money. It was really, really thin margin, because as the manufacturer in China, you don't keep the margins. It's the importers that do. And then I was helping him was like, Dad, we don't need somebody else. And I see how they're bullying you. I'm going to sell it for you. Let's just sell it here in the US ourselves. So that's how I started this asphalt store online, trying to sell Dad's machine.
Wow. Wow,
Yeah.
that's really something. So you started this store basically to try to get around these fees that he was paying. So Molten then is not really the first company that you started.
No, it's not the first company. It's the first company I'm very passionate about, though.
Okay.
But I think I went through my own business school for the last decade, starting, I would think 2011, 2011. Yeah.
So you have your formal PhD, but you also have your informal MBA then. Nice.
Yeah.
Sure that he really appreciated that. So when you got into that, you're doing like things relating to pavement. When did the idea go off in your head that maybe there was some play here that you could actually do something good in the world of pavement? It's one thing to do something because you want to help your father out. It's another thing to think I can actually solve a serious social problem like plastic waste.
Yeah, it's a very good question. How the story developed was, then I've always wanted to do something related to environment, but I was in grad school and doing this medical implantable devices. So that was somehow unrelated. But okay, let's rewind the story a little bit and see how I got here. I was helping my dad on the side throughout grad school. And then he passed away from cancer. He got cancer in 2015, just a year before I graduated from Caltech. And then, so I was left with the store, right? And then, so I was left with two choices. One is to shut down the store. And in that sense, to me, it's like letting the business die, right? Together with Dad. And then the other choice, and get a job. That would be the first option, where work at Google or work at some big pharmaceutical company. And second is to continue this and make something great out of this business. I think I took maybe the irrational the option, and all my friends think I was crazy, but it was pretty clear to me. I didn't want the business to die. I think if I want to make something, I put my own passion into the business and morph it into something that's good, that's legacy live on. Mm-hmm. That's in one sense, I feel connected to him. The second is it's like my passion. And then I was luck strike, and I was pitching around some AI company at that time. I thought I'll change this into this, like, I wrote an AI software that would detect potholes and cracks on the roads, trying to sell to the government. That you will mount it, like, this software will be in a smartphone camera. The smartphone camera will collect the data, and then the software would do all the learning. So that will be mounted on the garbage truck and etc. So that will be selling to the government. And I was pitching it around. So this investor, I met this investor.
Yeah. To who were you pitching this? You're pitching it to investors? You're pitching it to government agencies? Okay, got it.
Yeah, at that time it was just a prototype of the software. So I was pitching to investors and trying to, basically get that off ground. And then this investor, what turned out to be the investor, right? I talked with many, but Tom, he was saying, you're going to be selling to governments. You're going to be a vitamin, which is a nice to have. It's not a painkiller. I'm sure, Paul, you're in business and you're a great CEO. You know all about that, right? So selling, and also selling to government, selling to G is going to be really long, tough selling cycle. And then then we started talking about the plastics, how all the landfills are filled up. And because that at that time was 2018, was 2019. So that's the year after China has stopped taking in plastic waste, because all of our plastics, all of our municipal waste to be just literally packed into containers and shipped to China. And then they would do the heavy lifting and recycle them. And China in 2018 decided they have enough on their own to recycle plastic-wise. So they banned all imports of waste plastics. And then that's why the system got a shock in Europe and in US, all the developed worlds. So you used to have to pay for these waste plastics. And now they're giving it for free and nobody would take them. They just end up in landfills. And so you actually have to pay to dump in landfills. And so Tom and I thought it's a problem. Obviously, it's a problem. And also it presents a huge opportunity. Because chemically it's the same thing. It's a plastic. If we can somehow make use of it, downgrade it or something to put it into asphalt in a way, then that will be a big business. And it's good for everybody. It's a win. Yeah. So that's how Molten. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. It's an impressive story, Shelly, the idea that you could turn trash into treasure, basically. But how do you do it? What is it that actually, you go to a landfill, you take a whole bunch of plastic out of it, and how does that become something that then goes into a highway?
It's a very good question. Basically, the problem with landfill not being useful is, I probably touched a little bit in the talk. So now I can expand here a little. Mostly because the way we're trying to recycle them, we try to sort everything out and make them into, upcycle them in a sense, to make them into their original shape, PET as PET and LDP as LDP. It's very hard to do with plastic. And it's just thermodynamically uphill, very energy intensive, is fighting against nature, fighting against physics. That's very hard to do. And what we're trying to do is, instead of trying to make them pure again, we make a soup. So we take all this mixed plastic and then we would thermally break them down in the absence of oxygen. So it's also called cracking or pyrolysis. Basically, if we're careful and then control the parameters, we can break down these to have different groups of useful chemicals that would have important performance, that would enhance the performance of asphalt. So basically, we take the landfills and then we make a soup of different groups of useful things.
So is this being used as a sealant where there is a crack or a pothole, or is this the actual road? Could you pave a fresh road with this?
Oh, okay. It's a very good question. What we're making is, at least right now, is a additive to asphalt. So what it means is you still have your asphalt, So what we put this in to make the road last longer. And actually there are, depending on how we crack these plastics, there are different functions we can provide. For example, one product is called the rejuvenator. What it does, it's an Estee Lauder for asphalt. So it's like a face cream, anti-aging face cream for asphalt. So one use case is you would pave your roads and then you would spray this rejuvenator, right? This anti-aging cream every year. So as a maintenance, which people do spray similar petrochemicals. And then you spray this to prevent the premature aging of asphalt. So instead of, say, the road would be repaved every 10 years, you can extend this to, say, 2030. So this actually tackling native stress of everything is under oxygen, right? That's on the planet Earth. And we're all under oxygen stress. So it's like giving vitamin E, vitamin C, the antioxidant to the asphalt. So that's the additive we provide. That's one of the additives.
Interesting. So in that case, you're more like a vitamin for the asphalt as opposed to the painkiller for the asphalt.
Now I think about it, yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. So how far along are you? You mentioned you have an investor. How much money has Molten Materials raised so far? Like how scaled is this process?
Yeah, unfortunately I cannot disclose the amount, but the investor had personally put in 3 rounds already, and we are setting up a pilot production facility in Sacramento, actually around Sacramento, in that area.
Okay.
Around.
Cool. I hope to come. I hope to get an invite to come visit. That would be pretty cool.
Yes, when we're demo ready, for sure. And we're hopefully in the spring, because we're setting it up as we speak right now. And hopefully next year we'll have our first product out. And that's when we'll be looking at some, the first serious round.
Got it. So these products are not being commercialized just yet. The company is still pre-revenue.
We have our correct in the sense that this product is not being it's not generating revenue yet. And we do have our bicycle store. That's how I like to think. We are profitable in the sense we'll have a slightly longer runway than we support our own R&D with our existing. The store I had started with my dad. So the bicycle store to the Wright brothers, that's how I see, because they use their revenue from their bicycle store to support the R&D of their flight venture. Eventually they succeeded. So that's how I would like to tell my employees team, that's how I see this we're doing now.
Okay. Cool. All right. Very cool. I read on your website, Shelly, said that you could basically use all of the world's plastic and instead of landfilling or incinerating it, turning it into roads. That's a lofty claim. And I wonder how many cracks in roads, how much demand is there for this? The entirety of the world's plastic is, of course, billions of pounds of plastic. And you're saying that you could single-handedly take all of that, subject it to your process, and just revolutionize how we make roads. That's the claim?
Yes, that is the general claim. And it's based on just the pure calculation of how many asphalt roads there are in the world. And actually how many are, then there's a maintenance, and that was the maintenance side, and how many new roads are being built each year worldwide. And then I'm not saying I can or I want to single-handedly. I would welcome people and other startups and taking plastic other ways. The reason I put that in is I got excited because number-wise, we pave enough roads to be able to take in all these plastic. That's the take home.
So will you be the one selling this, or are you looking to license the technology to others who might be able to scale it up more quickly to then go and do that? What's the business model here? Is it that can my wife and I, or homeowners, and we have a crack in our driveway, will I be able to buy a box of molten pavement sealer that I can utilize in my own home?
Yes, hopefully next year. It's our the current business model is we'll be the manufacturer and we'll make it in-house. Then our first market will be actually the DIY market, because that will be the best, the fastest iteration we can do, the product feedback cycle we can have, and in terms of how we need to improve and all that. And before we go pursue DOTs, for example, and the bigger contractors. So to your question, you should be able to buy a box of Molten, hopefully next year. And in terms of sorry, the second question is
Yeah, will there be a play
license.
toward? Yeah, will there be a play toward licensing? There's presumably companies that, like, you're an expert in this technology of how to turn plastic into something that can be a road sealant, but presumably there are companies that have extensive manufacturing assets already in place, and I bet some of them may want to license your technology so that they can do that. So, do you have the patents in place where you will be able to license this to them? And is that of interest to you, or do you want to do it all yourself?
Yes, we have the IPs, and then anything is possible, right? It's whatever makes sense, and then whatever opportunities comes our way, we're open to that, to all opportunities.
Cool. Okay. Great. So when you say you have the IP, you have filed for the patents or you already have patent protection granted?
Oh, it's pending.
Okay. Cool. It's exciting what you are building here, Shelly. It could really make obviously a really big difference. How big is the company now? I know that you've raised some cash from an individual investor. I know you're not disclosing exactly how much, but how many folks are working at Molten now?
Okay. We have about a dozen people. It's a small team, and I try to keep it lean. And on top of that, it's individual contractors and stuff.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
And so the goal is that by the end of next year, so by the end of 2023, you're going to have the first products out to market.
Yes.
Exciting.
My fingers crossed.
Right.
I
Yes.
believe in the tech, and it's just a matter of implementation, right?
Yeah. And
when things scale up, and we just need to learn as we set it up.
Indeed. All right. Very cool. Is there a difference between one type of plastic and another? Do you have access to a certain type of plastic and that you can't just use any plastic that comes your way?
Yes, chemistries in different plastics are very different. And what's good about this technology is if we keep it within certain temperature range, we're very tolerant in the products. We can make a soup, right? And yes, the plastics are important. However, we don't have to be as careful as the upcycling folks. They have to get 97% purity. No, we just need to make sure we have like within 20-30% range of LDPE, for example. And then the general landfill, that reflects the general landfill. So we're not too picky.
And why go to the landfill? Like, I presume that recycling factories have have a much easier way to give you plastic that you may want. Is there a reason to go to the landfill where things are commingled versus just going to a recycling factory that may have plastics that they can't recycle?
That's a very good question. I think actually post-industrial, what you're saying, we are working with factories. So I cannot disclose the names, but yes, we are factory. So they want zero waste, closed loop. They want to say their production is that way. And then it works very well for us as well. So to take directly post-industrial plastics and break them down. So
Cool.
what we do, that's obviously the preferred way. But eventually we really want to be able to attack the landfill problem. That's where most things are, where the problem is, where other people cannot deal with.
So how does that happen? If you go to a landfill, it's this massive dump of just intermingled trash. Do you require humans to go through and pick out the pieces of plastic that are in there? Like, how do you actually work with a landfill to recover those pieces of plastic in order to upcycle them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Right now, if we wouldn't be digging up landfill per se, it'll be like instead of dumping in landfill, people will come to us. So we'll take them for free.
I see. So you'll be averting waste that would go into the landfill.
Exactly.
Got it. Interesting. So basically, instead of paying to dump it in the landfill, they'd give it to you for free. Cool. Okay.
They don't have to pay. We don't have to pay.
Yeah.
And then in the end, it's a cheaper product even and performs better than digging up than the petrol based when it becomes like a valuable thing and we can sell it for cheaper. So it's a win-win. That's
right. So when you say cheaper than petrol-based, you mean cheaper than what I as a homeowner would go if I went to Home Depot to purchase a product that was like a pavement sealer, or you'll be selling it for cheaper than what I would pay for that at?
That's the idea. We're able to sell for cheaper. It's because we can make it for cheaper.
I see. Cool.
Basically, if you just go get a box of just to be more accurate, a bottle of rejuvenator or like a jug of it today, you'd be probably paying $2 to $3 per pound. It's actually, this stuff is cheaper and more expensive than gasoline. It is a niche market. So anyway, and this rejuvenator is made mostly from asphalt.
I see.
And then So asphalt price, because of the Ukraine war and COVID and all the logistic problems, everything compounded, asphalt price went up like 3 times over the last 2 years. That's why and plus, so that's one, the price of these stuff had really skyrocketed. And then that's why you have to pay a more expensive, more higher price than gasoline to get this, something that presumably will be cheaper to make. And we will be able to, it will be a perfect opportunity for us because our costs haven't increased. It's zero, still the same in terms of raw costs, raw material wise.
Yes.
So we have a competitive edge from the core technology. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm really excited about.
It sounds very exciting. If you have a free feedstock in order to feed into your process, that's pretty good. So basically, your energy and your labor costs are going to be the primary cost of goods sold for you. I can't wait, Shelly, to purchase a box of Molten for my home. I'll look forward to that. I hope you'll let me know. But in the meantime, you've been running your own business for some time now. Molten is only a couple years old, but obviously, as you mentioned, you were doing your own business even prior to that. So in your own education, either as your DIY MBA program or even in your formal PhD program, were there any resources, Shelly, that were useful for you in your own journey that you would recommend to others? Any books or anything else that you think somebody would be wise to check out?
Yeah, I think there are many great books. It's all the stories of how other entrepreneurs really made it big. There was one example of like this book called Shoe Dog. It's how how Nike became Nike. And it's really the owner, the entrepreneur himself that made something impossible, keeps pursuing, went to Japan a bunch of times. It's a really fascinating story, Shoe Dog. And another book, I may be a little seemingly unrelated, but it really changed my life. I want to recommend to any entrepreneur, scientist, or just any person is this book about Richard Feynman. It's called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. So it's anecdotal stories told about Feynman. And I think he told it with his drumming buddy later on, of all these stories from when he was in college to later graduate school and then the PhD and as a professor, and how he won the Nobel Prize.
Okay. So, we'll link to both of those. So for those who aren't familiar with Richard Feynman, he was a physicist who, as you mentioned, is a Nobel Prize winner. And we'll link to both of those. I have not read Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, but I did read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the founder or the co-founder of Nike. And I thought that was such a good book. I loved hearing, or rather reading, all of the near-death experiences that the company had prior to making it. And you just know of Nike as this major behemoth in the business world, but you don't know the backstory until you've read Shoe Dog and see how many times this thing came close to total catastrophe. So I really appreciated that book, and we'll certainly link it in the show notes at businessforgoodpodcast.com, along with this other book too here. So I'm glad to get that recommendation. It looks great, and I can't wait to read it. Let me ask you finally then, Shelly, obviously you have started now not one, but 2 companies, and you are presumably going to be committed to Molten Materials for many years to come as you're growing this business. But you probably have ideas for other types of companies that you hope will exist that could solve some problems out there in the world. So if you weren't doing this, maybe you'd be doing something else. Do you have any recommendations for a listener that maybe they should take up the mantle on and start their own company?
Oh, wow. Yeah, indeed. I think, first of all, they should really just follow their heart, right? I can only speak from my personal experience and what I'm passionate about. But finding your passion, I think it's the key difference of when near death, like you mentioned, during those near death experiences, whether you survive or not, has to come from your heart. That being said, I think there are 2 important things that could change the world. That if I had extra time or maybe extra money, I would really want to work on. There are 2 things: energy and computation. So that's everything, all the resources we're fighting about. I think the war and everything, right? It coming from this scarcity of energy. And we're still today digging up carbon from ground and burning up yesterday's leftovers. And when there are so many, I'm talking about nuclear fusion, nuclear fission. Fission is probably more realistic. Clean fission. I think safe, clean fission is what I think may be the most realistic pathways to a energy abundant society we can have as human beings. And I would love to be working on that. And so that's one. And also the treatment of the nuclear waste. And that's also important because there is none right now. We're just storing them in tanks. But it is an engineering problem that's solvable, just like any other engineering problem. Another thing I would think is quantum computing, because everything comes down to energy and information. And quantum computing would just open up. If you think AI we're good now, and this will be kids' play if we have quantum computing. It just opens up all the possibilities of what as human beings can do. I might just solve the energy problem, or vice versa. So yeah, these are the two things. Seemingly a little crazy, but coming from my heart.
That's very cool. We did a past episode with Elizabeth Muller from Deep Isolation, which is a startup that's working on nuclear waste disposal. And so it's a really interesting episode. We'll link to it at the show notes at businessforgoodpodcast.com. But in short, it's illegal by federal law in the United States for a private corporation to permanently dispose of nuclear waste. And so all of these nuclear power plants have all this radioactive waste that's just sitting there on site. So you have all these different locations with very insecure radioactive waste just sitting there. And so Elizabeth and her company are pioneering ways to essentially create ways that you can store that waste for thousands of years safely, but also make it retrievable so that they can get around this federal law, which says you can't permanently store it. And so it basically involves diagonal drilling as opposed to going straight down and making it, putting it deep beneath some of the rock on the crust of the earth, but making it technically retrievable should you be able to go out and get it. Or if somebody figures out a way that you can actually do something with that radioactive waste to either neutralize it or make money off of it in some other way. So we'll link to that episode, but it's a pretty interesting look at the economics of the nuclear waste problem that we face today. But hopefully with clean fission or maybe even fusion in the future, we won't have that problem at all.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to add to your point that these nuclear fission waste, they may not be just waste, just like the plastics, right? And it's because the efficiency of the current or the old technology, the fission technology, the temperature they're running at. I'm by no means expert in nuclear fission. It's just the little knowledge I have. And it's these with new technologies, with new clean and maybe high temperature fission, and these waste maybe just become new fuel. So in that sense, what she's doing, making it retrievable, I think it what makes it really is valuable. It's very valuable.
I hope that you have such success with the company that you will not be in the fission world anytime soon. I hope that you're going to be running Molten for many years, Shelly, but it sounds if you have an exit from Molten that maybe you have your next company waiting for you there with that idea. So with that said, I want to say thank you. I'm really rooting for your success. I hope that Molten is a massive improvement over what we currently do with all of this waste plastic today. So I'll look forward to getting my own for my own driveway when it comes out and cheering you on from the sidelines.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul. It's a great pleasure talking with you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you found use in this episode. If so, don't keep it to yourself. Please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. And as always, we hope you will be in the business of doing good.